La Bolduc. Mary Rose-Anne Bolduc, born Travers, June 4, 1894, February 20, 1941, was a musician and singer of French-Canadian music. She was known as Madame Bolduc or La Bolduc. During the peak of her popularity in the 1930s, she was known as the Queen of Canadian folk singers. Bolduc is often considered to be Quebec's first singer-songwriter. Her style combined the traditional folk music of Ireland and Quebec, usually in upbeat, comedic songs. Biography Childhood Mary Rose-Anne Travers La Bolduc was born in Newport, Quebec, in the Gasque region. Her father, Lawrence Travers, was an Anglophone of Irish heritage, and her mother, Adeline Cyr, was a French-Canadian Micmac. Her family included 5 full siblings and an additional 6 half-siblings from her father's first marriage. Bolduc and her 11 siblings spoke English at home, but also spoke French fluently. The family was extremely poor. Her only music teacher was her father, who taught her how to play the instruments that were traditional in Quebec culture of the era: the fiddle, accordion, harmonica, spoons, and jaw harp. She learned traditional music from the 2 heritages, both Irish melodies and French-Canadian folk tunes. The family did not own a record player, piano, or sheet music, so Bolduc learned jigs and folk songs from memory or by ear. She was giving casual public performances by the spring of 1908, when she played the accordion at the logging camp where she worked as a cook and her father as a lumberjack. Early working life. In 1908, at the age of 13, Bolduc was sent to live with her half-sister Mary Anne in Montreal, Quebec. Mary Anne worked as a maid and had secured Bolduc a job as a maid in the house of Dr. Lesage. She was paid $15 per month, in addition to room and board. A few years later, she took a job at a textile mill, which paid $15 weekly for 60 hours of work per week. On August 17, 1914, she married Edouard Bolduc, a plumber. The couple's first child was stillborn. Denise Bolduc was born in July 1916, Jeanette Bolduc in July 1917, and Roger Bolduc in August 1918. Roger died at the age of 10 months and Jeanette at 2 years. The couple experienced more bad fortune with pregnancies and children. Of the 12 or 13 pregnancies, only 4 children reached adulthood. The family was quite poor, and in 1921, when Edouard had difficulty finding work, they decided to move to Springfield, Massachusetts. Edouard Bolduc's sister was living there at the time. They returned to Montreal a year later, as Edouard had been unable to secure work in Springfield. During this time, Mary Bolduc entertained both friends and family with her musical talents. Among her friends were amateur musicians who sometimes performed with the Valise du Bon Temps at the Monument National under Conrad Gauthier. Musical career. Conrad Gauthier's troupe was missing a folk violinist for a performance. One of Bolduc's friends arranged for her to fill in for the absent performer. Gauthier was suitably impressed by her performance and asked her to return for subsequent productions. The family was always in need of money, and the small income she earned this way was useful. Bolduc became a regular player with Gauthier's troupe by 1928, playing the violin or the jaw harp. Her work with them expanded to include other instrumental work and even some comic acting. Bolduc was recommended by folk singer Ovila Leguer to musical producer Romeo Baudry of the Compo Company. Baudry signed musicians for French-language recordings on the Star Records label. Baudry signed her to a recording contract to make 478 RPM records, paying her $25 per side. She made her first recording in April 1929, the French folk song Longtemps Queji Couch Par Terre on side A, and an instrumental reel on side B. The record was a commercial flop. Her next two recordings also had meager sales. Bolduc's second recording was released for Christmas of 1929. The first side had an original song of Bolduc's La Cuisinière. Side B was an adaptation of an English folk song titled Johnny Monfarlo. The record sold more than 12,000 copies, which was unprecedented in Quebec. Bolduc earned a total of $450 from the sales and became a household name in Quebec. With this success, Baudry had Bolduc releasing a double-sided record every month. Bolduc recorded an additional 4 songs in January 1930. 9 more songs were recorded in April that year. By the end of 1930, she had recorded more than 30 songs. During this time, she collaborated on no less than 56 recordings of other artists. Most of these recordings did not credit her. Bolduc sang accompaniments or played instruments for recordings by Juliette Beliveau, Eugene Denault, Ovila Leguer, Alfred Montmarquet, Adelard St. Jean, and possibly others. Bolduc's first headlining performance came in November 1930 in Lachute at a costume ball. The audience was extremely receptive to her music, and she was inspired to start a show that focused on her own songs. In March 1931, she took an offer from a burlesque company at the Théâtre Harlequin de Quebec to perform as their main act. From this, she embarked on a 3-month tour of Quebec with Juliette Darger. Starting in Hull in May 1931, they traveled western Quebec and Montreal, finishing in Sept Isles in July. In 1931, her rising popularity increased the cost of her sheet music from $4 for $1 to $3 for $1. Bolduc formed her own touring troupe in 1932, named La Troupe du Bon Vieux Temps. She hired Jean Grimaldi to direct the tours. The performances contained elements of both vaudeville and traditional folk music. Their first tours were around the Montreal area, and from August through December 1932 they gave 50 shows. The tours were a great success in Quebec, with Bolduc earning $2,000 from her first tour, compared to $500, $1,000 annually she got from royalties. The troupe went on a tour of New England from April through June 1934, and a second tour of New England that autumn. They toured across Quebec, and in 1935 toured the French-speaking areas of northern Ontario. They went on additional tours of New England in 1937 and 1939. As the 1930s progressed, Bolduc's record sales began to slump, but her income from touring remained good. Bolduc stuck to her folk music style as the record-buying public turned increasingly to jazz and popular music. She produced 18 records in 1930 and 10 in 1931, but with her declining sales she recorded nothing from July 1932 until she released a single album in March 1935, and then 4 more in 1936. In 1936, the family was able to afford a nanny to attend to the children while Bolduc toured. Beginning in 1935, her daughter Denise appeared with her as a pianist. Other children occasionally appeared as backup singers, and her daughter Lucien recorded a l'enfant vol. Bolduc was seriously injured in June 1937 in Rivière-du-Loup when her tour company's car was in a head-on collision. She suffered a broken leg, a broken nose, and a concussion. She was sent to a hospital in Rimouski for treatment, where doctors discovered a cancerous tumor. She began radiation treatment at the Radium Institute in Montreal and engaged in practically no musical endeavors at this point, making no stage appearances for a full year. Her insurance company refused to pay for her damages, notably the concussion that caused memory loss and loss of concentration, which prevented her from writing songs. The suit ended badly, as Bolduc did not use banks and had no record of her income to prove loss of income. Of her total damages and lost income, Bolduc recovered only $1,500. Bolduc began limited touring again in the summer of 1938, only in the Montreal area. She made a radio broadcast in January 1939 and made 2 recordings in February 1939. One of those songs, Les Souffrances de mon accident, French The Sufferings of My Accident, was on her accident. She died of cancer on February 20, 1941 in Montreal, and was buried in the Cimetière Notre-Dame des Neiges. Musical style. Bolduc never had any formal music lessons, and developed her own style under the influence of her father's teaching and the musical traditions of Irish folk music and Quebecois folk tunes. Her songs tended to be happy and comical with lively rhythms. Her self-written songs often used existing melodies from folk tunes or dances, combined with lyrics she wrote herself. For instance, she wrote the song Les Cinq Jumelles about the Dion quintuplets, which was set to the tune of Little Brown Jug. In other cases, she adapted popular contemporary American songs. Bolduc often used the technique of the enumerative song, which lists something such as foods or tasks. This technique was traditional in French-Canadian folk songs, derived from similar French traditions. Bolduc also employed the traditional French folk song style of the dialogue song, usually a duet with a man, where the song is a conversation or debate between the man and the woman. One such song was Mademoiselle, Dites-moi donc, which she recorded with Ovila Leguer and featured the 2 of them bantering and flirting comedically. She often wrote in the style derived from traditional English broadside ballads, which tell current news to the tunes of traditional songs. One such song by Bolduc is La Chanson du Bavard, which notably employs an introduction inviting the listener to hear a tale, as is common in broadside ballads. Other topical ballads by Bolduc include Les Américains, about Americans coming to Montreal during Prohibition to obtain liquor, and the unrecorded C.G. Pouvail's Tenir Hitler, which she wrote a few days after the outbreak of World War II. Her music relied heavily upon the harmonica and the fiddle, the traditional instruments of reels in Quebec. Her singing also adopted a nasal style, and her pitch was relaxed, both of which are found traditionally. Her singing often featured terlutage, which derives from Irish and Scottish musical traditions. Most often she employed this technique in reels, such as her song Reel Turlute. Her touring troupe La Troupe du Bon Vieux Temps gave fairly consistent performances. Mary Bolduc opened the show with her newest songs. The troupe then performed comedy sketches, ensemble songs, folk songs, and vaudeville routines. Most performances included a segment where amateurs performed, sometimes for cash prizes. Bolduc closed with some of her newest or most topical songs. Bolduc's lyrics are predominantly French, but frequently include a few words or lines in English. This was reflective of her country upbringing in Gaspésie, where the 2 languages mingle. The recordings were marketed to working-class francophone audiences in small towns and rural areas where people had traditional values. Professional image. Singing and stage careers were not well regarded in Quebec society of the 1920s and 1930s, especially for women. To avoid gossip and to keep a good reputation, Bolduc was always credited under her married name Madame Edouard Bolduc, both at live performances and on recordings. She attempted to include her family in her activities as much as possible. Her husband Edouard accompanied her troupe on their 1932 and 1934 tours. Her eldest daughter Denise joined the troupe in 1935 as a pianist. Recordings of about 100 of her songs survive. Many of those that have not survived were written for special occasions. April 12, 1929, Il longtemps quigi couch par terre and la Gaspésienne. August 13, 1929, Gender and Belmire and Quand on Est Vous. November 22, 1929, Valse de Nice and Reel de la Golette. December 6, 1929, La Cuisinière and Johnny Monfarlo. January 15, 1930, La Servante and Regardes donc Mauman. January 29, 1930, Arthemise Marie Le Bideau and Tourne ma Roulette. March 11, 1930, Le bon homme et la bonne femme, si vous avez une fille qui vous si marier. March 18, 1930, Real Comique and Galop des Pompiers. April 3, 1930, Le Joueur de Violon and Ton Amour, ma Catherine. April 30, 1930, Real Turlute, G. des Camires duet with Alfred Montmarquet, Fantaisie Écossaise duet with Alfred Montmarquet and Real Bommerel duet with Alfred Montmarquet. May 14, 1930, Fracasses vous, Valse Turluti and La Moreau. May 20, 1930, Claude F. Parent with Alfred Montmarquet and Delard St. Jean, Real des Barbouilles with Alfred Montmarquet and Adelard St. Jean. June 18, 1930, Mon Via Est Jaloux and La Pitoune. June 27, 1930, Un petit bonhomme avec un nez pointu and chez ma tante Gervais. August 21, 1930, Taugers El Quotar 100 and less Marignuings. September 23, 1930, Quand va venir de courages vous passe and fin begailluit. October 27, 1930, Le Bastring and Mademoiselle, dites-moi donc. November 4, 1930, Les Agents d'Assurance. November 5, 1930, Chaplot fait son jour de Hélène duet with Ovila Leguer and Say Kameka Quang Espace duet with Ovila Leguer. November 13, 1930, Rouge Carotte. November 14, 1930, Le Jour de L and Le Bas de Noël. December 9, 1930, La Petite Boulanger duet with Ovila Leguer and Mechitaguine duet with Ovila Leguer. December 10, 1930, La Grosserie du Coin and La Gigouze with Albertine Villeneuve and Thomas. December 12, 1930, Le Propriétaire. January 15, 1931, Fetins Le Mardi Gras and Un Via Garkin Jean. February 3, 1931, Les Fils de Campagny and Nos Braves Habitants. March 26, 1931, Le Sauvage du Nord and Jean-Baptiste Beaufouet. April 9, 1931, El Ouvrage aux Canadiens and La Chanson du Bavard. July 7, 1931, C'est la fille du vieux Rupi and Il va me faire mourir Cigarsla. July 8, 1931, La Côte Nord and Aux Chauffeurs d'Automobile. September 15, 1931, Sequel est slow tit Joe, Chanson de la Bourgeoise and Le Commerçant des Rues. October 8, 1931, Tit Noir à la Mal Imaginaire. November 6, 1931, Argard donc Sequetiers d'Hilaire and Dance and Soliers d'Iboafs. November 7, 1931, Vienne vite c'est le jour de Hélène, and voilà le Père Noël qui nous arrive. January 20, 1932, J.I. Unbouten sur la langue, Rose Church à marier quand j'étais chez mon père and les femmes. May 5, 1932, L'enfant vol, si les saucisses pouvaient parler, les policemen and les Américains. July 2, 1932, En revenant des foins, les conducteurs de chars, les vacances and sans travail. March 6, 1935, Les Cinq Jumelles and La Gaspésienne Pure Lane. March 20, 1936, Les Collins Canadians and La Lune de Miel. April 15, 1936, Les Médecins, Gédéon Amateur and Les Pompiers de Saint-Éloi. April 27, 1936, Arrête donc, Mary. August 24, 1936, Les Belles Mères and Quand j'ai 20 ans. February 23, 1939, Tout le monde à la grippe, Le voleur de poule, Je m'en vais au marche and Les souffrances de mon accident. Unrecorded original songs. Songs known to have been written and performed by Mary Bolduc but never recorded include La Réunie des Bières, As tu veux à l'éclipse, Le Nouveau Gouvernement, La Visite Royale, C.G. Pouvais tenir Hitler, Roosevelt est un peu là, En déménage, Les Secours Direct, Legacy. Some debate exists among historians as to whether Mary Bolduc or Félix Leclerc should be identified as Quebec's first singer-songwriter. Either way, both had significant influence on the development of Quebec's folk music culture from the 1930s onwards. Bolduc was the most widely known folk music singer of Quebec in the 1930s. Her humorous images of daily life, her realism in depicting the society of the time, and her satirical characters all appear in the work of subsequent singer-songwriters. Although it was received poorly by critics of the day, Bolduc's use of colloquialisms and working-class vocabulary influenced future musicians like Gilles Vigneault and Clémence des Rochers. Other Quebecois musicians with notable influences from Bolduc include Oscar Thifault, whose style was descended from Bolduc, André Gagnon, whose composition Les Turlutaires is based on Bolduc's use of turlutage, and Robert Charlevoix, who also sang in the dual French-Canadian and English-derived style and used the everyday slang of Quebec. On August 12, 1994, a stamp was released that honored her with her portrait on a Canadian postage stamp. The stamp was designed by Pierre Fontaine based on images from Bernard Leduc. 7.5 million copies were printed. The same year, a park was created in her hometown of Newport named Mary Travers Park. In 2002, Mary Bolduc was made a Master Works Honoree by the Audio-Visual Preservation Trust of Canada. La Bolduc, a biographical film about Bolduc by director François Bouvier, was released in Quebec in April 2018. The film stars Debbie Lynch White as Bolduc.